Cheesy the Podcast, presented by Just Cheesy Productions.
Hi there, I'm your host, Fondue. This week's episode is quite possibly our most controversial ever. We're going to talk about orange and white cheddar. Which one's better?
Orange.
We're going to find out if mice really do love cheese.
Of course they do.
We're going to talk about robots and cheese.
What robot?
And of course, we're going to hear a very cheesy joke.
Oh yeah.
Stay tuned for episode number 15 of Just Cheesy, the podcast. So cheesy, it sounds like you have an opinion on the great cheese debate. White or orange cheddar, which is better?
I actually don't know the difference.
I didn't either.
Really?
First, we're not talking about things like Kraft mac and cheese that changed a few years ago from their yellow number 5 and yellow number 6.
Okay.
First, we have to find out why cheese has different colors.
Let's hear it.
According to the website cheesescience.org, there are 3 basic colors you will find in cheese: orange, yellow, and white. And according to this website, we're not going to be talking about the age of the cheese, inclusions, or animal breeds, but they can also affect the color. The deep orange color that most people associate with cheddar is actually from annatto. Annatto is a seed from a South American tree called the achiote tree.
Who knew?
It's widely accepted that annatto does not change the flavor of the cheese in any way.
Interesting.
When not using annatto as a dye, cow's milk cheese can actually be colored anywhere from pale yellow or cream to deep yellow or straw. The yellow color of the milk is impacted by the diet of the cow. Cows absorb compounds like beta-carotene, and beta-carotene is yellow in color.
Wow.
Beta-carotene is found in large amounts in grass and clover. So if a cow eats a lot of grass, the cheese will be more yellow.
That's so interesting.
And if a cheese is very white, the chances are it's actually goat cheese. Unlike cows, goats and sheep actually break down the beta-carotene into colorless vitamin A.
So what about orange and white cheddar?
According to an article on NPR.org, centuries ago in England, their cheese actually had a yellow to orange pigment, and guess why?
Beta-carotene in the grass.
That's right. So the orange cheese was considered a mark of quality. It says here that cheese expert Paul, and I'm going to butcher his last name,
Of course you are.
Kinstead of the University of Vermont, explains that back in the 17th century, many English cheesemakers realized that they could make more money if they skimmed off the cream to sell it separately or to make butter from it. When they did this, however, most of the color was lost because the pigment is carried in the fatty cream. What was left was low-fat cheese made from white milk. In order to get people to believe that this cheese was of high quality, they had to trick them by masking the color.
Oh, that's bad.
They added coloring from saffron, marigold, carrot juice, and later annatto, which comes from the seeds of the plant we talked about earlier.
Wow.
This tradition of coloring cheese carried over to the U.S. Lots of cheesemakers in Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, and New York have a long history of coloring cheddar.
Who knew?
The tradition never really caught on in the New England dairy farms. According to this article, it also says that places like Shelburne Farms say that they see a lot of color changes when the cows are eating fresh meadow grasses, and it's a little bit more like the golden color of straw.
Way to go, cows of Shelburne Farms.
Shelburne Farms, not a sponsor, but if they were, their ad would go right here. I don't know about you, Cheesy, but I've gone through most of my life thinking that mice love cheese.
Of course they do. Tom and Jerry told us so.
Well, today I decided to find out if that's true. According to AmericanRatControl.com,
American Rat Control?
well, I figured they might be a good source about rats and mice and other varmints.
Okay, let's hear what they say.
According to this website, when it comes to rats and mice and cheese, it might actually be a myth made in a misunderstanding.
Aw, really?
According to this website, this myth goes back to the Middle Ages. Many of the foods that rats and mice preferred were kept out of reach. Meats were often hung and cured, and grains were often stored in jars.
Okay, but what about cheese?
I'm getting there. Cheeses were often stored out of sight and allowed to mature in cupboards or sheds or caves while they were aging. And then once they were ripe, they were simply left out. So these were much easier for the mice and rats to get to, and they were usually found nibbling on the family's cheese supply.
So they do love cheese.
Not exactly. It looks like it was more about supply and demand. The mice and rats were able to easily get to the cheese during the Middle Ages, and cartoons like Tom and Jerry have solidified this image in our minds.
Right.
A 2006 study at the University of Manchester found that rats and mice are actually more likely to turn their noses up at cheese.
Aw, Oh, no.
Because cheeses have a strong smell that rodents often find off-putting. The rat wranglers at Rat Central recommend...
Rat wranglers?
Yes, the rat wranglers at Rat Central recommend that those who are keeping rats as pets, that they limit both the variety and quantity of cheese ingested, because many cheeses can actually be harmful to rats and mice.
Aw, poor little guys.
Rats and mice typically prefer sweets and grains, and depending on the species, some of them prefer meat.
Grains, sweets, and meats, but not cheese.
I'm quoting from this article now. It says that rats and mice are opportunistic foragers, which means that most things that will readily supply nutrition will meet their not-so-exacting standards, including their own tails
Ew.
and even each other if things get too desperate.
So gross.
So apparently they like their tails better than cheese.
I no longer like rats and mice.
On that note, let's move on to my favorite segment.
This week in cheese.
It looks like we have 2 articles this week on robots and cheese.
Really?
Our first article is from roboticsandautomationnews.com. There's an article called Scientists Invent Cheese-Tasting Robot by David Edwards. Apparently, there's a scientist at the University of Copenhagen that has invented what they are describing as a cheese-tasting robot.
Tasting?
Right? I was thinking the same thing. I'm all for automation, but a cheese-tasting robot?
No way.
The robotic system is currently operational and helping a multinational Danish dairy products company, Arla, with quality control of its cheeses. They say that it can see whether the cheeses meet the dairy's quality standards for safety, texture, and taste.
Okay.
Prior to the robot, quality control was actually the fine noses of dairy workers and their sense of what the consistency of a cheese ought to be.
Fun job.
They say the robot should be able to help them catch errors at the beginning of the process and not the end.
What's the other article?
The next article comes from thedailymail.co.uk. There is a $325,000 robot which is set to make a grand debut at the Paris International Agricultural Show. The robot is named the Buoybot, which is named after the Buoy-Boes, which are teenage boys who spend the summer up in the mountain chalets, helping herdsmen while they take care of making cheese.
Wow.
The Buoybot is actually going to be making cheese fondue.
Fondue?
Yep. It pours wine into the classic fondue mix of
Here we go.
Vacherin, Fribourgeois, and Gruyere. It then does some figure-8 stirring.
Okay.
It sprinkles in some pepper.
Uh-huh.
It picks up a metal spike.
Right.
It pierces a piece of bread.
Sure.
It places it in a holder.
Okay.
And then the fondue lovers get to try it before the cheese drips down.
Yum.
It's not meant to be a human replacement.
Sure.
However, it could help someone to cook in the future who may not be able to cook for themselves.
Holy cow.
So there you have it, robots and cheese.
Are you ready for a joke, Fondue?
I sure am, Cheesy.
Where is the cheese grater?
Oh, I know this one. Either Italy or France.
No, in the kitchen cabinet. Get it? Kitchen cabinet, cheese grater.
That's so silly.
Nope, it's a little bit cheesy.
Thanks for listening to Just Cheesy, the podcast. Join us next week for episode number 16.
Stay cheesy, everybody.